Nora Callan's husband was buried on the ridge in a January that came 2 weeks early, and the map he left her was drawn in pencil on the back of a feed receipt, and it pointed straight into the cliff face, where no woman with sense would go alone in a blizzard. She had nothing else to hold. No money, no deed the bank would honor, no name on any paper that mattered. Only the map and the blizzard already building along the ridgeline. If you believe that love doesn't end when someone leaves this world, subscribe to Mountain Hollow Stories and ring the bell so you don't miss a single tale. James Callan had died on the 14th of January from a pneumonia that moved fast and left faster, and what it left behind was a woman of 47, a daughter of 8 years old, a homestead of 31 acres in the upper hollow of Carter County, and a note at First Federal of Knoxville that James had taken on 3 years prior when the roof blew off and the timber market went flat in the same summer. Nora had known about the debt. She had not known how close it sat to the edge. She found out the morning after the funeral when Dale Callan, James's younger brother, who had not come to the burial, came up the gravel road with Mr. Rourke from the bank riding alongside him, both in good coats, neither of them carrying food. Mrs. Adkins from down the road was still at the kitchen table finishing her coffee when Dale sat down without being invited and laid a manila envelope on the oilcloth between them. "The note's called," Dale said. "James was 90 days past due. That's not something I can fix." Mr. Rourke set his own envelope beside Dale's and said nothing. He didn't need to. Nora read both documents where she stood. The bank held a lien on the property. She had 60 days. The land would revert to the creditor if the balance was not satisfied in full, which was a sum she would not see in 60 months, let alone 60 days. Dale leaned back in James's chair and looked around the kitchen. "James always was better at starting things than finishing them," he said. He said it the way people say the weather, plain, like it was nobody's fault. Mrs. Adkins set her fork carefully on the rim of her plate and kept her eyes on the window. Nora did not respond. She walked to the wood stove and put a piece of split oak on the fire and kept her hand on the cast iron rail until she heard Dale's truck back down the gravel road. May was in the back room. Nora could hear her on the floorboards, moving the way children move when they are pretending they aren't listening. That night, after May was asleep, Nora took the map from the pocket of her housecoat and spread it on the oilcloth. It was a feed store receipt from Thurston's, James's pencil lines light as thought, the ridge line behind the homestead, the cliff face above it, a small mark near the top of the face, and below it the word open, and below that smaller, for Nora, when she needs it. She had thought it was the fever talking, the morning he pressed it into her palm. She had not thrown it away. Outside, the first real snow of the month was beginning. The snow came in earnest on the 19th of January, 3 days before the county road crew gave up on the upper hollow, and it was the kind of storm the old people called a killing snow, low sky, dead quiet at first, then the wind arriving all at once like it had been crouching behind the ridge. Nora had lived through 3 like it in her 47 years. She had never tried to climb the cliff face in one. She told herself she was waiting for the weather to break. She waited 8 days. The bank's letter sat on the kitchen table and did not get lighter. On the morning of the 27th, May woke up coughing, a deep, settling cough that Nora recognized from James's first sick week, and something inside Nora's chest locked down hard and told her, "Go now." Not because the weather had broken, because waiting had become its own kind of blizzard. She dressed May in 2 wool sweaters and her heavy coat. She prayed over the child the way her own mother had taught her, short and plain, under her breath, and then wrapped her in the old patchwork quilt, James's grandmother's quilt, the one with the red and brown squares that Nora had always called the blood and mud quilt, which had made James laugh every time. She packed a canvas bag with cornbread, a jar of canned pears, the kerosene lantern from the kitchen shelf, and the map. The cliff was a 40-minute walk up the back ridge in clear weather. In knee-deep snow, it was closer to 2 hours. Nora carried May on her back for the lower stretch and let her walk when the ground leveled off in the stand of hemlock below the rock face. What she didn't know yet was that the cliff already had a witness. Old Eli Stokes had kept a lean-to at the base of the south face for better than 30 years, since his wife passed and his sons went north to Ohio. He was sitting on an upturned crate feeding kindling into a tin stove when Nora came through the hemlocks with May on her back and the canvas bag over one shoulder, and he looked up at them the way men look at things they have been expecting, without realizing it. "You James Callan's wife," he said. It was not a question. "I am," Nora said. He moved over on the crate. "Get that child in here out of the cold." The lean-to was barely larger than a root cellar, but it was dry, and the tin stove put out a fierce, steady heat, and there was a shelf with canned beans and a jar of hardtack and a dented tin coffee pot that had been there as long as the lean-to had. Eli gave May a tin cup of warm water and hardtack and looked at Nora across the stove. "He told me you might come up here someday," Eli said. Nora looked at him steadily. "James," Eli said. 2, maybe 3 summers back. Came up the face and sat with me a while. Said if his wife ever came up here with a map he'd drawn, I should take her to the place. Said he'd know when it was time because I'd know." He turned the tin cup in his weathered hands. "I'm sorry for your loss." Nora felt something in her chest begin, very slowly, to be something other than cold. They waited out the worst of the afternoon wind inside the lean-to. Eli fed May warm broth thinned from a can of beans and told her about a red fox he'd watched cross the rock face at first light that morning. And May sat with the patchwork quilt around her shoulders and listened and stopped coughing by degrees. The map came out. Eli studied it less time than Nora expected. "That marks the notch," he said, tapping James's penciled X. "Natural shelf before it, maybe 40 feet up the face. Crack in the rock behind the shelf runs back a good 8 feet. You won't see it from the ground. You won't see it from above." He handed the map back. "James and I went up there once, 12 years ago or so, when he was looking for where an old spring had gone dry. He didn't say much about what he'd done there, only that the place had history." "Did you go inside?" Nora asked. "Far enough to know it wasn't nothing," Eli said. "The snow dropped straight and heavy that night. No wind, the kind of stillness that can fool you into thinking it's letting up when it's really just gathering itself." Nora lay awake on the spare blanket Eli had put on the floor and listened to May breathing and to the snow on the lean-to roof, and thought about James's hands. The way he had folded the map twice before pressing it into hers. Careful and deliberate. The way he did everything he meant to last. Each morning in the lean-to settled into the same shape without anyone arranging it. Eli up first, the tin stove going by the time Nora woke. The kerosene lantern set on the shelf between them because the hollow light came late and left early. May woke third and received her tin cup without ceremony. They didn't talk much. There wasn't a need for it. The second morning, Eli said, "Weather ought to break clear the day after tomorrow. We go at first light." Nora nodded. Outside, the patchwork quilt was draped over the lean-to opening as a windbreak, its red and brown squares going dark with cold at the edges. May had named one of the squares after Eli's red fox, and she told him this with great seriousness. And Eli listened with equal seriousness and said that seemed right. The morning they climbed was cold and windless, the kind of cold that packs the snow firm enough to walk on. Eli went first with the rope. He had a wooden peg set in a crack at the base of the cliff face, there for years, and he rigged a short belay for Nora without being asked to explain it. May stayed below at the lean-to with the kerosene lantern burning, and the rest of the cornbread and strict instructions not to go anywhere, which she received with a gravity that showed she understood. The climb in the ice took 40 minutes. At the shelf, a limestone ledge barely wide enough for two people standing close, Eli stopped and pointed left. The notch was a crack in the rock faced the width of a person's shoulders, running back into the cliff in cold darkness. From the shelf it was plain as a door. From anywhere else on that mountain it was nothing but shadow. Nora reached in. Her fingers found the oilskin cloth almost immediately, and behind it the hard square edge of a tin box, cold as the cliff itself. She carried it inside her coat for the entire climb down. And what was inside it, what James had climbed up here to leave her in the years when he still could, was going to decide everything that came after. Inside the lean-to, with May pressed against her side and Eli across the tin stove, Nora opened the box. 3 things: a folded letter in James's handwriting, addressed to her by name, a small leather pouch holding 2 gold Liberty coins, old and heavy, each about the size of a silver dollar, and a legal document, folded lengthwise with care, printed on county paper, a mineral rights claim for the Callan Ridge tract. 93 acres of ridge and subsurface, filed with the Carter County Recorder's Office 11 years prior, bearing James's signature, the signature of a notary public, and a document number stamped in red. Eli held out his hand for the document. He read it quietly, turned it once to check the back, then set it flat on his knee. "There's a company been going through this county," he said, "buying up mineral rights. Natural gas. My cousin sold his parcel over in Stony Fork last September. He smoothed the corner of the paper, paid off everything he owed, and kept the land." Nora looked at him. 93 acres of ridge above Carter County," Eli said carefully. "That's not a small parcel." She held that still for a moment. Then she picked up James's letter and read it aloud. For Eli, for May, for the Lord's quiet that had settled over that lean-to at the base of the cliff. It was short. "Nora, I was never much good at saying things out loud. This is my way of saying them. I filed this 11 years ago when the gas company first started looking through these hills, and I didn't know yet what it might come to. Then life went on, and it sat up there. I told myself I'd tell you someday when there was reason to. I guess now there's reason. Don't let anybody push you off this land. I already made sure they can't. Tell May her daddy loved her. James." Nora set the letter on her knee. May had been reading over her shoulder. "Is it good?" she asked. "Yes," Nora said. "Did Daddy know we were going to need it?" Nora looked out at the ridgeline through the lean-to opening, the cliff pale above the hemlock line, the sky going clear for the first time in 10 days. "I think he knew someday we might," she said. "And he wanted to be ready." May was quiet a moment, working it through. Then she said, with the clear confidence of an 8-year-old who has arrived at a conclusion, "He always was good at that." Eli excused himself to check his woodpile and left them alone, the way a person does when they understand something is private. Nora sat there with the document spread on the lean-to floor, and James's letter in her hands and her daughter warm against her side. And she understood, in the way that comes when understanding has been fully earned, that her husband had not left her in January. He had left her 11 years before, a road through the worst winter she would ever face, and had trusted her enough to find it herself. She put everything back in the tin box and closed the lid. Then she folded the map the same way James had folded it when he pressed it into her palm, and tucked it in her coat pocket. "Let's go home," she said. The road cleared on the 2nd of February. Dale's truck appeared at the end of the gravel road before noon, and this time he came without Mr. Rourke, which meant he'd come to talk rather than to process. And he came with a different kind of manner, less certain, more careful, the way men get when they have been turning a thing over for days and not liking the answer they keep finding. He stood at the kitchen door instead of coming inside and held his hat in both hands. "I wanted to see how you and May were getting on," he said. "We're fine," Nora said. "Come in." She set the mineral rights document on the table in front of him. She set beside it a piece of brown paper on which Eli had written the name of the gas company and its county contact, and the figure his cousin had received per acre in Stony Fork, and the recording number from the Carter County recorder. She let Dale read all of it. The kitchen was quiet. The wood stove ticked. May was in the back room, and the sound of her moving around on the floorboards was the only other thing in the house. Dale read the document twice. He set it down. "James filed this 11 years ago," Nora said. "It's recorded. 93 acres of ridge and subsurface, mineral rights. I'll be contacting the company directly." She let the next part settle before she said it. "I expect the bank will be satisfied in full before the 60 days are up." Dale looked at the table for a long time. "I didn't know he'd done this," he said. "I know," Nora said. "If I'd known, I would have." "It's all right, Dale," she meant it, because she was not carrying anything extra that morning. James took care of it. Dale nodded slowly. He stood and put his hat on. He was nearly to the door when Nora said, without heat, without hurry, he was always better at finishing things than anyone gave him credit for. She said it plain, the way you say a true thing. Dale received it the same way, with a small nod and his eyes somewhere else. The look of a man who has been corrected and knows it and doesn't argue. He left without coffee. When the sound of his truck had gone all the way around the first bend in the gravel road, May came out from the back room. "Is it done?" she asked. "Just about," Nora said. May came and stood beside her at the kitchen window, and they looked out at the ridge together, the ridgeline still white in the February light. The hemlocks stand below the cliff face dark and quiet and unchanged, the way some things are. "Can we go back up there?" May asked. "To where we found the box?" "In the spring," Nora said, "when the ice is off the face." May accepted this. She went to the table, picked up the tin box, and opened the lid to look at the 2 stick figures James had painted inside, one tall, one small, both on the cliff. She studied it for a long moment with the seriousness she gave to things she was committing to memory. The word went through the hollow within the week that James Callan had left something on that cliff, that the bank had been settled, that Nora wasn't going anywhere. People said it with the weight they put behind things that are right, and when they saw Nora in town after that, they said her name differently, not with pity, but with the kind of regard that gets paid to a person who came through something straight. By April, the snow was off the ridge and the hollow was running with snowmelt, and May had decided she was going to put a garden in behind the woodshed in the patch Nora had always meant to clear. Eli came down from the mountain for the first time in years, and he and Nora sat on the porch and drank coffee from the same kind of dented tin pot he kept in the lean-to, and watched May work the dirt with a hand trowel, with the focused determination she brought to everything that mattered to her. The mineral rights had been leased in March. The figure was enough to satisfy the bank, clear 3 years of strain, and leave enough in the account that Nora stopped counting the weeks. She had not spent $1 more than what was needed. She had learned that from James, too. The map was framed now, in a simple blue-painted wood frame that May had done herself, and it hung on the kitchen wall between the window and the door, the pencil line still faint but legible. The ridge line, the cliff face, the mark, the word open, and James's note below it. Nora had put the letter behind the glass with it, folded so the back of the envelope showed, for Nora when she needs it, because that was the part she wanted visible. May touched the frame with 2 fingers every morning on her way to the table. She didn't say anything when she did it. She just touched it. Eli stayed for supper the first time he came down, and then most Saturdays after. Mrs. Adkins came Sundays. A family from the next hollow came at Christmas. The table that had been too quiet and too large for 2 found its proper size again. One afternoon in May, Nora stood at the kitchen window and looked at the ridgeline and thought about James. Not with grief the way she'd known it in January, but with the quieter thing that comes after grief has done most of its work. A permanent, unfinished conversation she was not ready to end. Sometimes the ones we love know exactly what we'll need before we do, and the truest gift they leave us isn't what they take with them, but what they keep finding ways to give. Love like that doesn't stop when a person does. It just changes its shape. Have you ever found that someone you lost was still looking out for you, a choice they made long before you knew you'd need it? If this story moved you, leave a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Give it a like, subscribe to Mountain Hollow Stories, and ring the bell so you never miss a tale. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that love doesn't always say goodbye when a person does. Until the next story, and on a Saturday in June, with the ridge gone green and May hollering from the back plot about the first tomato coming in, Nora looked at the map on the kitchen wall and said, quietly, to no one in the room, meaning it for someone, "Thank you, James." She said it the way you talk to people you are not yet done talking to.